welcome to your first B2T episode.
Thank you. Kind of feel honored and excited and nervous all at the same time. First special guest. Let's do this.
Yeah, just to kick us off for episode 4 with our first special guest, Daniel, do you know what the name B2T means?
Well, I know B2B pretty well. No, but fill me in.
All right. So T is a slang term that the kids use for like gossip, basically.
Okay. Okay.
So our whole point is we're trying to spill all the tea on B2B marketing.
Let's get messy. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I have my special mug. This is a tea mug. It's from a local artisan in Truckee, California. One of my most treasured possessions.
I'm drinking my tea out of your typical office cup.
Typical office cup. All right.
What is the typical office cup? This one is one Hamid got for me when he went to the baths in southern England while I was working.
So let's get started with our first question, which is it's actually less of a question, more of a reaction. And so for those of you who don't know, Daniel is a PR maestro. So we're going to talk about the phrase, there's no such thing as bad press. It's the phrase you hear a lot, like, hey, I think especially like right now, I think of Jake Paul, honestly. Like he has tons of attention and makes a ton of money on kind of like notoriety and people wanting him to get punched in the face. That's like how he makes money right now, which is kind of crazy. So love to hear your guys' thoughts on no such thing as bad press.
I'll kick it off. No, it's an interesting phrase used a lot. I've heard it a lot in my career as well, Sam. But I'm actually on the side. It's a matter of how you use that press to your advantage. Bad press is bad press, and reputations and support behind a brand or an individual can change at the snap of a finger, in an instant, overnight. But it's how you react to that press and either turn it into a positive through growth, through reaction, through learnings. Yes, it gets your name out there overall and gets you impressions, but it also is a discussion of brand appeal and brand sentiment. So I'm actually more on the fence of, bad press is press in general, but it depends on how you use it moving forward for your company or brand or individual. And individuals like that, you mentioned the Paul brothers, for example, yeah. Jake and Logan Paul. If you go back a couple of years ago, you can look up all the controversies they've continuously gotten into in their careers. To some degree, they found ways to bounce back from some of that. But it's a growth process here.
I don't know who Jake or Logan Paul are. Can you guys briefly fill me in?
Yeah, Jake and Logan Paul are two brothers from Ohio that got their start on Vine, doing 6 or 7 second comedy clips, and then when Vine died, they transitioned to YouTube, and now they do all sorts of things. And Jake has become a semi-pro, I guess, boxer. And they've been very, very successful. And Logan has really cleaned up his image, kind of to Daniel's point, right? Like he's done a very, very good job of taking what was some like huge controversies and then kind of like coming back from them. For instance, that phrase, no press is bad press, works a lot better if you're making money in the attention economy. If you're making money in a B2B scenario that is maybe more like our industry, is like a little bit slower moving, a little bit more dependent on reputation, I don't think you really want bad press per se. Like, yes, there's always an opportunity to sort of respond to it in a way that makes you look even better, but still that original initial impression, I feel like, sticks with you, especially in these sorts of industries that we're trying to serve.
Well, there's another reason why people say that all press is good press, which is that people actually tend to remember negative news more than positive news. It's an interesting aspect of psychology that we fixate on that. And then if you have a good crisis communication strategy in place, you can react to that news. And now you not only have captured people's attention, but you've rectified the problem, assuming that you have a good communication strategy that gets that message out. but you're generating that buzz. But I do agree with you, Sam, that it's a little bit more when you're dealing with the attention economy. But as we're talking about this, I can't help but think about the Volkswagen scandal. Did that seriously hurt Volkswagen? I mean, they're still here. But also now every time I think of Volkswagen, I think, oh, they lied about their green stuff, And so I will always, for me personally, I will always associate that. So when your reputation is critically important, it's a little bit more that, negative press is negative press.
So I think that question has overtones of the more philosophical question of, is it better to be loved or feared, right? By Machiavelli. And no, it's not really the exact same, but because the Machiavellian question is more like, how do you retain power? And this one is, how do you retain reputation? But the answer in Machiavelli's work, The Prince, is that it's better to be feared, because if you show your subjects that bad things will happen every time they don't respect you, there is a precedent of consistency that lays down the law and allows people to have predictability in their environment. And in B2B marketing, there is a similar need for that predictability, because we don't really need, you want your company to be good, as in virtuous, but really when you say this company is good, you mean that this company will consistently deliver what they say that they deliver. And the main problems with really, really bad, terrible messaging about a company is not that the company, committed a sin. It is that the company didn't deliver what they said they were going to deliver, or they claimed something that they didn't claim. So I think that the need for authenticity and truth in what you're messaging, and the need to set expectations that you can deliver upon, is true in both the desire to be loved and feared and the need for general marketing. That's my spiel.
That was the best thing I've heard on this podcast in 4 episodes.
Thank you.
Jay Marie dropping knowledge bombs.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can't wait to clip that one just for Niccolo Machiavelli on B2B marketing. So let's transition this. So we've already kind of touched on this, and it's actually one of my second questions that I really wanted to discuss. And Daniel, I'm really curious to hear your answer as somebody who has a lot of experience here. But what are the hallmarks of a good crisis management PR strategy?
Absolutely. It's all about the reaction time. A lot of crisis communications is about being as prepared as you can be in advance, and sometimes you're not. Expecting the unexpected, but being as prepared as you can be for that. There have been times in my career where we've had to create crisis communication strategies at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to address maybe a national disaster, or a product or brand outage that may have occurred at a company I worked with in my previous career. But it's, as you develop a strategy of how you market a product or plan, being able to ask those questions ahead of time and plan for the what ifs is absolutely key in every crisis communication plan. And responding to that, as I mentioned before, in a very timely and transparent manner. In public relations, people can see through the weeds a little bit on what is a very prepared, almost inauthentic reaction or quote or stance on a certain topic, or at the same time, what's coming from a true, authentic, valuable, and meaningful point of view. That's sort of the areas that, at least in my career, I tried to make sure that targeting crisis communication plans hit and made sure that they were taken care of. But the longer you wait, the more inauthentic you are. To our point before, the more bad press, unfortunately, you may have to navigate through to address that crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like you can sort of see when a brand is like very clearly trying to like posture an apology that isn't really an apology versus anytime somebody or again a persona or a brand or a company is just upfront like, yeah, no, we screwed this one up. Here's what we're doing to rectify the damage we've just caused, and here's what we're doing to make sure that this never happens again. I feel like
Yeah.
those are sort of the moments that kind of like define how well that crisis gets handled. And as you said, reaction time, right? Like if it takes 3 days, then it feels like, oh, wow, you weren't prepared for this. And also now you're trying to, again, do damage control way too late. Whereas if it's immediate, it feels more authentic to people, even if, as you said, like if you've done a lot of preparation, maybe it isn't as quote unquote like reaction authentic because you've done this prep, but it feels that way to the people who are just learning about this in some way.
When the topic of crisis communication comes up, I always think about the example, one of the first examples we did in class at university, which was looking at, the problem of concussions in the NFL. One of our first assignments was to think about, how would you communicate something like that? And we recently had kind of a big news flurry when the Buffalo Bills player collapsed, and all this buzz started generating about that and what it meant for football, and several people kind of got in a pickle in how they responded to that. So I just thought maybe I'd put that out there. Anybody have like thoughts? What would you do if you were the communication strategist in that situation?
That's fascinating. What did you say?
You're having to balance, different things, right? You got to balance. All right, someone's been injured, right? That's a human being. They have a family, they have fans, and you want to be considerate of that. And then you have to consider the goals of your organization. You are providing football to people, and you're going to have a range. Some people think, hey, we need to change football. We need to take tackles out. And you're going to have to be aware that there's all these different things in your audience, but you also have your target audience, and you have people who maybe don't want the game of football to change, and just kind of coming out with a careful, measured message that addresses what happened, that, as Dan said, authentically discusses what your organization is going to do moving forward, honestly and straightforwardly, is important.
I think that's a great point, Melanie. And I'm a huge football fan myself, by the way. Go Saints, because you're a New Orleans Saints fan. Even though they're not doing too well right now, but hey, that's when you're a real fan of a football team, is when they're not doing well. But that whole topic is very interesting just in itself, and the positioning you mentioned earlier, and a lot as far as communication plans that have worked for me when you're balancing two completely different and very opinionated ideologies when it comes to those topics, is trying to identify and work on middle ground messaging, finding ways to be like, well, we can't completely take tackles out of the NFL, but what steps can we take to make sure that we increase the safety, the amount of preparation to make sure that, one, that these situations hopefully happen less, but two, that we are ready to help and be there for those situations as they happen. So whether it comes to crisis communications, partnerships in general, communicating with individuals, it sometimes is about finding that middle ground in the message and winning them over with that. So that's a very, very good example of a very relevant and interesting and trending topic of what's gone on in sports recently.
Yeah, I mean, you think of the Damar Hamlin Bills player issue, right?
Yeah.
Everything happened on live television with millions of people watching. I can't think of almost like that's a worst case scenario from a PR perspective. I'm assuming you have plans in place for something like that, but it's the sort of thing that you hope will never ever happen. And then all of a sudden, and there was a lot of like on TV, right? They were saying like, are they going to restart the game? And like, you can't start the game. And like a lot of people have got in trouble for saying, yeah, maybe they should restart the game. That ended up happening like that those communication lines weren't super clear. And then that ended up getting a lot of people in trouble.
Oh, I remember that completely from earlier this year, and social media was irking me, cracking me up even from it too, because again, for those that don't know full context, I mean, there's people were worried that this individual might pass away from a live injury that happened. People seeing this broadcast on national television. But then you go on social media and you see people from the point of view, oh, well, they need to continue the game. It's the last week of fantasy football and all these other outside perspectives that are being weighed into a serious topic. So you hit the nail on the head there, Sam. It's a matter of while you don't want to, thinking through the worst case scenarios and finding and having that solution in a communications and crisis communications plan to be able to address those as they come up, which I guarantee you, moving forward, they have more context in how to address those situations. But there's a first time for everything.
Good conversation. I'm going to transition this to something a little bit more personal. Daniel, I have a question for you that I'm really curious about.
Sure.
Do you have a career aha moment, like a moment that you can look back on and be like, that was a real like enlightening point in my career, and that's kind of like changed the way that I've thought about, myself moving forward, myself in the business world moving forward?
Been marketing now for about 13 and a half years in various roles of marketing, operations, as you said earlier, public relations, event planning, a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, which is pretty fun. It's kept it pretty interesting. And as I started earlier in my career, what attracted me to the idea of doing marketing and branding was flashy, eye candy, trending approaches to creating viral campaigns. And this is even before, this is 10, 13 years ago. So just almost in the infancy of viral marketing. I've always been very interested in music marketing and finding ways for people to get out their music by putting a random flash drive with their new song at a concert venue on the ground, and a fan finds it and uploads it online, and then it grows organically. Ideas like that always sparked me growing up, but always looked through that vein of like creating the flashy campaign. And there was a specific leader, I'll say his name, Winston Awadzi. I was an individual I worked with in my previous career, who really inspired me to, dive deeper into the data decision making behind the campaigns we would create. And I think here at Mobius, we do a really, really great job of looking at the data, what's working, what's not working, and applying it to what we do decision-wise with our advertising, with our investments, our partnerships, our resources. So I could say that he, for me, really got me thinking through, as we win over, marketing campaigns and projects that we put together as a company, looking into the black and white data that supports that. Yes, there's a appetite and a vision to create trending, great and cool ideas, but how can we make sure on the back end that it resonates with the right particular data set, or is pushing the right key performance indicators for us? So that's something that was really an aha moment for me. That's kind of evolved how I look at putting together marketing campaigns and even press campaigns. And then past that too, I guess maybe this is more of a piece of advice that was given to me that I took, growing up in my career, is to never be afraid to ask for help. We're always so driven, I think, as marketers and individuals, to want to figure out the answer ourselves, to want to have our full solution and not have to rely on other people to create it. But at the same time, I found that I was very conscious of the fact that I don't know everything. I know a lot. I'm pretty good at what I do, but I don't necessarily know everything about everything. And being able to lean in on subject matter experts, partners, even peers outside of our industry that might have best practices, have helped me develop ideas as well as just overall outlooks that have improved me as a more well-rounded professional. So I guess I'd say those 2 points were really ahas for me in my career so far.
Absolutely. Great answer. So before we jump into our little activity game, I just have two quick questions for Melanie and Daniel, who were not here for the pod last week. Yeah,
Cool.
and this question was, if you could have lunch with anyone, who are you picking? I think I picked Bryce Hall, and Jane Marie, refresh the audience on who you picked.
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I don't remember at all.
Okay.
It was Joe Rogan.
There it is. That's what it was. So we have Bryce Hall and Joe Rogan, and Melanie and Daniel, you guys are on the spot now.
Well, I would choose Lex Fridman of a popular podcaster who's actually, friends with Joe Rogan. But I really like his interview style, and I feel like he's talked to a lot of really important people in the artificial intelligence and software development space. But he also, a key part of his podcast is interdisciplinary connections. So he often has people of various sorts on, and I just think he'd be a real fun person to talk to for sure. Have lunch with.
Solid answer.
Ooh, I've been kind of back and forth on this one because Sam gave me a little bit of a heads up on this question. He's like, "Hey, you heard last week's podcast, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I listen in. I gotta listen to the B to T." He's like, "Okay, start thinking through this," and I've narrowed it down to two. And for the sake of this podcast, I will say just one. But first off, I will comment: anybody that I interview with, I would rather take the $500,000 you talked about last week. So. That's a lot of money. I don't know if I would spend that much or give that much money away if given the choice of interviewing this individual or $500,000. Unless I could think of a good idea to make more, but if you present that in cash, that would be kind of hard to pass up. But I would say I have a very interesting one, very unique one. Some of my own personal interests. I love electronics, technology, gaming to a degree. And during my free time, I spend way too much of my own time on YouTube, more than any other cable broadcaster or streaming platform. Your Netflixes, Disney Pluses, Hulus of the world. YouTube is what keeps my attention. And specifically for me, I always get a kick on some like free time of watching Markiplier. He's one of the most famous YouTube gaming streamers. At the same time, content generators for YouTube in its current state. He's been around on the platform, I think, well over a decade at this point, probably even more, starting in sort of the YouTube infancy and growing and evolving to where he, as an individual, I think recently got nominated for an Emmy for some of the work he's been doing on YouTube, creating full-length feature films. And I'd love to just talk with him about content creation and how it's evolved over time. Gone are the days, and not gone, but I think you guys touched a little bit on this in some of the previous episodes, but how content is created has gone from 30-minute videos to some cases 15-second reels, and how we've been able to capture the attention of worthwhile content in very quick and innovative ways. And I think that would be a very interesting view to guys just viewpoint on and how the industry's changed, and just from two gamer nerds to chat with each other. I'd probably just get a kick out of talking with them. So I would say either that, or I could go down another episode down the well someday on all my love of music itself. But Sam knows a little bit about that.
A little bit. All right, good answers, everyone. So the game is really simple. It's this or that, and I'm just going to present sort of two options, and I'm very excited to hear sort of just gut reactions to what you would prefer. So the first this or that we'll do is a merchandising option. And that is, would you prefer to have a branded puffer jacket or a branded quarter zip?
I would say right now, because it's a little freezing in Chicago, that puffer jacket option sounds so nice. I've seen a couple of Mobius senior leaders with their own versions of some puffer jackets, and Ooh, I want one bad. It's I think a really cool style. So I'm a Team Puffer Jacket fan, but that's just my style.
Same. Puffer jacket would be nice. I've got the quarter zip and I need the puffer jacket.
Yeah, I'm team quarter zip. I think that it looks better on me. That's the only reason.
That's an important reason though. You know, you got to think about what you're. I personally prefer puffer jackets as a general rule. I live where it's never below 40 degrees, except for like 2 days a year. I never get to wear them. So I probably am picking the quarter zip just on usability. But you know, if I move to Chicago, I think my answer would change. I prefer the puffer jacket if I lived in the Windy City. I do not though, so I will go with puffer. The next one is a organic social media strategy. You can only have one of these two social media platforms for your corporate account. Do you want an Instagram or a TikTok? We're going to say that for this scenario, you are a B2C company selling a product that is generally between $20 and $40.
I would lean more towards Instagram because the age of the platform is a little older than the average age on TikTok. I think about those that are decision makers who are purchasers. Again, both are very more younger targeted platforms, but I think the use cases behind Instagram content around consumer products is a little higher. Now we get into in the weeds and conversations of influencer marketing, where there might be more of a appetite to position towards TikTok rather more so than Instagram itself. But I just think through the consumer purchase mindset and platform most targeted for that, and I would lean probably more towards Instagram for that piece. If it's just general brand awareness and campaigns to support that through trending ideas, topics, and approaches, TikTok might make more sense, but would lean more towards Instagram.
I'm a little biased. I refuse to use TikTok. I do a lot of shopping on Instagram. I can't even get on Instagram if I don't want to spend money. So I guess I would pick Instagram.
Yeah, I would do TikTok to try to sell to international markets. I think that TikTok has a lot of penetration in like the Middle East, East Asia, India, all of those places. And also, I think that TikTok, I have been on TikTok 3 times before I deleted my account. But in those 3 times, TikTok showed me products that I wanted to buy and that were relevant to what was going on. And I had no idea how quickly they figured it out, what they knew from my like IP address, whatever. But I was really impressed because I had Instagram for like 6 years before I deleted it. And I didn't do a lot of shopping on Instagram, but like the ads were like not nearly as personalized as those TikTok ads were.
The key question, I think, is something that Daniel hit on a little bit and all of you have hit on. It's just that the in-app purchasing experience on Instagram is a lot better, I think, and a lot more there. And this is a huge, huge coup in social media because getting people off the app is extremely challenging. But if you can get them to buy in the app, that removes this huge barrier of like, you're just like keeping the dopamine going. So I've never purchased, I'm on TikTok more than I'm on Instagram. However, I've never bought something directly in TikTok, whereas I have with Instagram. So it is tricky that way. I think that if you're trying to build some organic social following, TikTok is probably a better bet if you're looking for like a sort of younger B2C demographic, especially. But in general, I would say Instagram is probably a better bet because of, again, the demographic of it and the in-app purchasing experience for sure.
I'll be very curious to see the TikTok driven audience a good 5 years from now and how that platform has evolved and whatever the next generation platform is and how the tool, the platform itself has adapted to that age and to those decision makers and to those consumers more so. So very, very interesting.
It is very interesting. And I would like to shout out Erica here, who helped me come up with these questions and suggested I ask about Be Real. So way
Oh
to bring it up.
yeah, shout out to Erica.
Shout out Erica.
Genius, miss ya.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got one more here. And this is, would you rather have an earned media piece in the New York Times, or would you rather have a, let's say, absolutely crazily viral organic social content piece hit? Let's say not our company per se, but let's say B2B, small.
Yeah, small B2B, I would rather do the New York Times. But any B2C context, I would do organic social. Going viral on organic social can really drive, you can convince people to buy the most outrageous stuff.
I would say the same exact thing. I think, organic social in the idea of word of mouth marketing from one neighbor to another. There's no better way to sell a product than to hear about it from the people that impact you the most. Yes, I completely see the other side of that, and having the reputable New York Times article or having the impressions that may come from that too. But I think, convincing the consumer mindset to the point of purchase, there's no better way to do that through organic social, in a positive organic social way. Great points, Jane Marie.
I'm just gonna play devil's advocate, and go with the New York Times, for variety here.
Yeah.
When you're in the B2B space, you're often, and in particularly if you're trying to kind of target like a CTO or a CIO or a CFO, where are their eyes at? And what is going to come off as reputable? How do you give yourself like, hey, I'm big B2B company, you end up in the New York Times, people end up knowing your name. Whereas with organic social, yeah, it spreads the message around. Yeah, I might get some buzz going, but does it get the buzz going with the right people, the people who are actually going to make the decision? And does it really enhance your reputation? But before I close, I do want to point out that when it does come to word of mouth, you don't want to be without word of mouth. I mean, at all. But hopefully you still have that your customers are still saying, hey, I used Movius, and Movius is, or your B2B, I use this B2B company. It's making my business so much better, smoother, faster.
It always comes down to where your decision makers are, like where your target personas, target decision makers are consuming. The advantage of a organic social viral post is you're spreading this like extremely wide net, and you're catching a lot of people, and it actually could catch, like some CFOs, right? Like, I think especially as social media becomes more and more ingrained, and as also like people who were born in social media rise to that level of decision maker, it's more and more accepted, and that might be a thing. However, the real advantage of a New York Times piece is the fact that there's a lot of information in there that is often not there in a viral social media thing. Like a 20-second video blows up and you get your main point across, and that's basically it, like maybe a secondary point. Whereas when you have these legacy media with a lot of like repute, their built-in readership is going to read the entire article, and then they're going to have a much deeper understanding of what your product is or what you're trying to sell or who you're trying to be. And they'll be able to make a more or what feels to them like a more informed decision, possibly. So if you're looking, again, if legacy industries, legacy media, new industries, new media is generally how I think about these things. So depends on who you are, but personally, for my job, I'll take the organic social piece. I think John would be really happy with
me. Definitely.
So, all right, this has been a fantastic episode. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate having you. As always, if you like this, you can subscribe to us here on YouTube. or you can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or visit Movius IAI to learn more about what we do. Thanks, everyone.